Yes! Oh, this is nice. What a wonderful place to be compared to last time. Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. We're doing another Star Frontiers video here, and this time you'll notice that unlike the last video, this is a much more calm, serene, pleasant space station that we're on. And that's exactly related to my question that I have. I thought after all those very long, arduous videos I'd done for Star Frontiers talking about the Bubba campaign, let me do something quick, I hope, and something that I can ask other Star Frontiers refs and players, because this almost came up in my campaign, but I thought, no, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to ask you guys and ladies, does this make sense? As per the title, are there slums on space stations? Now, let me just package this up. So we're here on a space station. It's very nice. It's all correctly, very nicely maintained gardens, and you've got ships overhead, and we've got apartments, and there's administration buildings, and all of that kind of stuff that one would assume on a space station, right? Of course. Now, I was talking with the guy who ran our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and I was saying to him, so I've got this problem where I need my players to kind of go to the bad part of town. And he was like, what's the problem? You could always do this and this and this. I was like, yeah, no. The problem is they're currently on a space station. And he's like, so what's wrong with having the bad part of town on a space station? And I was like, because that doesn't make any sense. And I want to ask you, can you have a sort of shanty town, ransackle, like degraded, downtrodden part of, is there a poor part of town on a space station? Because it makes sense in traditional town layouts and cities, ones that are on the ground with some history to them. It makes sense. It can happen, of course. Now, I will admit, I'm not a financial expert. I'm no economist. But I've played the banker in Monopoly. So it's pretty much the same thing, right? Without getting depressing, like the history of the growth of a town or a city, any settlement, is going to be driven by the center is typically where everybody meets and things go on and you get, an established civilization that occurs there. And if it's, part of a larger nation, they've all agreed on rules and regulations and a culture that runs things. And inevitably, there will be neglected parts of town. There'll be areas where social services don't reach, or there's some other reason or problem. And so that tends to get a little run down. And that's maybe where the less savory elements of the society hang out regularly. That's fine. That totally makes sense. But on a space station, this did not follow the standard rules of how a settlement is created. This didn't begin small and spread out in whatever the landscape dictated. This was constructed from head to toe by a big company or many companies, and the people who come here are vetted. They go through a procedure. This was what I was trying to argue with my Dungeons and Dragons. Now in his case, the DM has a different kettle of fish. He's got an old part of town. He's got ramshackle, like broken down areas. He's got a place that had grown up out of people coming here and building their township and all that kind of stuff. And parts of town go bad. But on a space station, no, at least not in my campaign. And I want to know, with the other Star Frontiers players and referees out there, do your space stations have like slums? Do you have homeless people and like vagabonds and various things that are, not part of the intention behind the settlement, but have been the result of the way things have gone? And does that make sense in your campaign? Because I don't quite grasp it. The argument I had with my D&D buddy was, this was the 80s, and I was coming off, kind of 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's a space station in that, and it's very much like a Hilton hotel. In fact, there's even a Hilton sign. It's somewhere that has been built and established for travelers coming and going from Earth to the moon. There's no, like, bad part of town on a space station like that, and it's a pretty big space station. And that's actually what a lot of the ones in Star Frontiers are kind of based on, is that idea, the big spinning wheel centrifugal force type. And I thought, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. Now, in the 90s, which is roughly when I had this conversation with my D&D DM friend, there were shows like Babylon 5, like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which were getting the idea of, like, here's a space station, but it's got, you know, darkened corners where maybe the less savory elements of the society live. And I did mention, when I was talking about my Bubba campaign, how when he and his buddy Val Grube went to Turladrom, they stayed on a basically Space 1999 moon base, but there was a bad part of town there. It was the mammal sector where all the non-Dralicite Rusk types lived. And so how can I say that that's okay, that makes sense, but not on a space station? I don't know. I'm a little torn. I was actually reminded, for my original no, this would never make sense point of view, I was reminded of thinking of this when I just recently watched the movie Downsizing with Matt Damon and Kristen Wiig. It's a surprising movie. I went into it thinking, oh, this looks like a comedy. The idea is essentially Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Matt Damon and Kristen Wiig decide to get shrunk down to little tiny, like the size of a Star Wars action figure. And I thought, oh, and hilarity will ensue. And then we watched it and it's like, oh, this movie gets dark. So if you're intending on watching this movie, get ready for some, like, interesting perspectives on where the human race is going and that kind of stuff. As an example, and I'm not spoiling much, as the beginning of the film, the reason they get shrunk down, this technology was actually designed, is because they realized, God, human beings make a lot of garbage, a lot of waste, and they're impacting the environment. If we shrink people down, there's a very small amount of garbage that's generated by that. Awesome! And that's sort of how it starts. And it goes into, like, the future of the human race and the planet, and it gets into some very dark territory that I won't spoil, but watch it, not intending it to be a comedy. You might enjoy it. But there are some scenes in that movie that are related to what we're talking about. He gets shrunk down. He's living in a little town, a little, like, miniaturized Star Wars action figure city. And there is a section where he has to go and talk to somebody in the bad part of town. He gets on a bus, I think, and it sort of leaves the protective bubble of this town and goes to this little side area, this side community. And he has to deal with some characters, and I won't spoil much. But I remember when I was watching the movie, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would people who have gone through a procedure, a medical shrinking procedure, which is quite elaborate, and in the movie they spend a long time showing what is involved in getting yourself shrunk down. If people went through that procedure, how would they then become the downtrodden of society? Like, this isn't like, it's a leap in the storyline that I don't think makes sense. You can't just have characters being poor and in bad luck situations when they've already paid for getting themselves shrunk down and part of this experiment. Similarly, you can't do that if somebody's gone to a space station. It's not like the neglected part of town can just survive without following all of the maintenance and all of the rules that the space station has decided on. Like, you need oxygen, you need water filtration and flowing and maintenance. Like, you need life support. You need things on a space station everywhere. You can't just ignore that bad little quarter of town and have, like, the seedy unlawful part of underground part of the society to just congregate there. That doesn't make any sense to me, at least back then. And when I watched the movie, when I watched Downsizing, I was like, yeah, exactly my point. You can't just have people being poor after they've gone through this procedure. Or can you? Again, I'm not an economy guy. I don't know finances. So maybe somebody who's watching has some insight, some suggestions, is perfectly fine with the bad part of town being on their space station. Do you follow, like, the Babylon 5 idea? Or are you like me? It's like, no, this doesn't make any sense for people who live on a space station to be anything more than given at least a bare minimum cubicle lifestyle type of thing. Like, you know, at the very least, you'll have maybe not the greatest quarters to live in and a job to go to, but at least you're not living, you might be living paycheck to paycheck, but you're never going to be in a situation where you are so destitute that your life can't go on, because that's the very nature of a space station. I don't know. I'm curious what the Star Frontiers players, and are there any sci-fi fans out there? If Gavin is watching, I know he watches the Expanse show, and I believe that also has a lot of this kind of idea of the downtrodden of society living on space stations. So if he's happening to be watching, you go ahead and give me your insight as well. Anyway, so this is it. A short Star Frontiers video compared to the last. I will be doing more short ones because those last ones were really huge. But I also have another saga to tell of another bunch of characters if people are interested. So let me know. All right, well, until next time, I'll see you down the rabbit hole.